everybody, Fiona Poltridge here with you today, and I'm very excited to be invited as a guest designer for our Mixed Media Moods for January. So how seriously cool is this mood board? The incredibly talented Lisa Pate, Australian artist, has been doing some embroidery, and I've been watching her on Instagram and I just couldn't wait to give it a go. I am a little disappointed with my first effort here. As you can see, it looks a little bit like some intestines, but that's okay. We can work with that. I am by no means an embroiderer at all. However, I can sew on a button, and that's pretty much all the skills you need to do what I've done here. Because pretty much what I've done is just tacked on some pretty wool that I bought from Spotlight. So no fancy stitches, just a basic tacking stitch or a straight stitch. I use quite a large tapestry needle. And here is the selection of different wool and thread and cottons that I have used. And I'm going to pull out the butterfly elements, the flower elements from this mood board. I might do something with this little frame, I'm not really sure. Definitely going to add some flowers. I've tried to stick with the colours that are on there. So I've got the oranges and the beautiful fuchsias, and I've just got the tiniest little hint of blue. So to make it truly mixed media, I'm actually going to add some other mediums to it. So some chipboard, and I'm going to do some stamping. The chipboard's from Unwow Studio, and the stamps are a Viva Las Vegas butterfly stamp. I'm not really sure where I'm going to put everything yet. I'm just going to have a play. This is not something I've ever done before. So it's all about experimenting, and I'll put things on and I'll take them off. But I think what I do want to do is I want to be able to see quite a lot of the material behind. I want a lot of negative space. The material's from some of my eco dyeing experiments, and so I really just want to show off the patterns that have naturally occurred. I think I want to create a kind of garden where the intestines are. I reckon that's going to help. And I've got some sticks from my garden that I also want to incorporate, because there's lots of natural sticks and bits and pieces on the mood board. So I figure I'll start off by doing my stamping, because there's going to be a lot of fussy cutting and I just need to get that out the way. I'm just using some good old jet black archival ink, and I'm stamping onto a nice white smooth cardstock. And then what I'll do is I'll cut out all those trillions of little butterflies. Okay, so there were 7, but it felt like a trillion. It's okay, I'm over it now. I've got some Delusions ink spray here in the slate grey, and I'm going to use that to dull down the brightness of my little white butterflies. Now, anybody that uses Dylusion inks knows that it's fairly pigmented. So what I'm doing is I'm just watering it down just a little tiny bit, and then I'm testing it on my cardstock. The grey has turned out not as pigmented as I expected, so I'm going to be able to colour all these butterflies directly with the ink, and they'll have a great grey tone to them. Very similar to what's on the mood board. Now I'm also going to add some Unwow Studio butterfly confetti. I just love this chipboard because it comes in lots and lots of different themes, and you can use it for various projects. There's little stars, and there's alphas, there's celebrations, you name it, it's there. And it's really good for just filling in those little gaps in your projects. Now I'm going to give mine a coat of white gesso. And the Unwow Studio chipboard, when you put white gesso on it, it ends up a beautiful grey tone, which is just perfect for this project. If you don't like that, of course, you can give it a second coat and make it whiter, but it's because it's laser cut and it's got that smoky, charcoaly edge on it, it mixes with the gesso and you get this beautiful little grey tone. See, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Okay, so just pop them aside to dry. They won't take very long. In the meantime, I'm going to get back to having a look at the design here. And I've decided that this flower is a little bit too big for what I want to do. So I hack at it with my scissors, because that's what you do. And yeah, it worked. I just trimmed it up a little bit. You'll see that it looks a lot smaller, a bit of mess there. But just when you think I'm finished, no, I've got to hack a little bit more off. But in all honesty, I have to say it actually worked quite well. Now, I don't even know where I got this flower from. It came in a little cheap packet from a craft store many, many years ago. I think the little yellow one above it might be a Prima flower. I did go through a patch where I made them. I know. Weird, hey? But that's why I love doing odd projects like this, because you get to go through your stash and pick out things that you haven't used for years or you'll never use again, who knows. Okay, so sticking with the theme of embroidery, or tacking as I prefer to call it, I'm just going to have a little play around about where I want to put these flowers. Honestly, I put them back where they started. I always do this. But I'm not going to glue them on. I'm actually going to tack them on. Like I said before, if you can sew on a button, you can do this, because it is literally through the bottom, over the top, back down, through again. Through the bottom, over the top, back down, through again. It's very boring. I've cut most of it out, but you kind of get the gist of it. I'm just using normal silver thread. To be honest, I had no idea what I was buying, so I just bought the pretty stuff. I only stabbed myself half a dozen times, which I thought was quite good, considering that I'm very uncoordinated with a needle and thread. And they really don't need to be secured greatly. You can see here I'm just tying it off on the back the only way I know how. I'm just threading it through like my mum showed me when she desperately tried to teach me how to do tapestry, and then just tying a knot. And that's secure enough. It's only going to hang on the wall. I mean, honestly, I don't have any plans to be swinging it around. So I kind of figure a handful of tacking stitches should be just fine. So here I'm just playing around with the placement of some chipboard, and then I remembered I wanted to put some twigs on it, so I'm breaking them up and making a little bundle. I often find the best way to get my bundle to stay together is just to wrap some fine wire around it. So I'm going to get out some really thin gauge wire and wrap that around. That'll keep it nice and secure, so when I'm actually trying to tack it onto my background, they're not all going to fall apart. Famous last words. Nah, I'm just joking. Actually worked really well. So wrap it all around, and then the next big question is where do I put it? Because like I said, I haven't done this before, and I wasn't really sure about the placement of things. It was a little bit tricky. I just chucked it up in the corner and decided that wherever it lands is where it's going to go. And believe it or not, I think that actually worked. Threading wool onto a needle, even a tapestry needle that has quite a large eye, can be really tricky. I find that if I have a really clean cut in my wool so that there's no frayed edges, and then use a little bit of water and stick the fibres together, it's not too hard to thread. So here I was showing you how proudly I tacked those sticks on, and the orange looks great. I'm really happy with the orange, because remember, I really don't know how to embroider at all. However, I do know how to make marks. And so the mindset that I got in was, well, I'm not embroidering here, I'm making marks like a journal page. So I started to treat the background as a journal page, and it just worked so much better for me. So I just made these random orange stitches coming out of the stick, and I really loved it. So once I got the hang of that, then I was on a roll. There was no stopping me. And the sticks were looking really cool, so I was kind of starting to feel this project. It didn't look like somebody's insides anymore. I didn't have an intestine feel about it. I mean, there was still a little bit of large colon there, but, you know, I was going to make that go away. It was fine. I mean, I hadn't even added butterflies yet. So with the whole tacking idea, I decided that I was going to put some navy blue into the mix. And one of the things that I will give you as a tip, because I learnt the hard way, is because I was using such a large embroidery needle, when you poke your needle through, it leaves quite a large hole in your material. So your little knot on the end of your wool actually needs to be a bigger knot, or else it just pulls straight through. So what I ended up doing with these tacking movements, these mark making movements, was I just looked for all the gaps in amongst where I'd put all my larger pieces and filled them with little tacks. It was brilliant. It worked really well for me. You can see I've gone down the right hand side, and then I got really brave and decided that I wasn't going to have to wrap my sticks together. I could just tack them on one at a time. And what I really enjoyed here was making it varied. Every time I stuck a new stick on, I changed it up a bit. I changed the colour of the wool, or here I am trying to show you, I'm pretty useless at close-up. There it is. I left this little springy bit. Anyway, so you can see all the sticks lined up, so I tried lots of different sewing techniques, I suppose. I mean, again, no embroidery, can't embroider, but I can tack. And so I add another stick, but this time I'm like, I'm going to wrap the wool around it and then I'll sew it on. So that every little stick on this side, unlike the other side where they're all just bound together by wire, had its own little signature. So this was the point where I felt it was really starting to come together. No more intestines. It's actually a little embroidery piece. And I just kept adding lots of little stitches in all the little holes and the gaps and the places. And you can see this one just goes in a straight line, and then I tie it off at the back. And when I turn it over, it just adds to it. It's just got this little line of stitches. Next, I wanted to add the chipboard, and so I started to line it up where I thought I wanted to place it. And I had this brilliant idea, because my wire is quite thin. It's a very, very fine gauge of wire. So I'm like, oh, well, it can fit through my needle, so I'll sew with it. Yeah, no, you can't. I mean, you can give it a go if you want, because, you know, maybe I just suck at it, but it was really, really hard, because I found that every time I pulled it through, it would twist. And when it twisted, it would either get caught up in everything else that's, you know, on the front or the back, or it would just end up in this loop, this little wiry loop that I then had to squash back down because it was just sticking up like a antenna. So that was a little bit of a mistake. But anyway, doesn't matter. I got some onto it, and then I decided that good old cotton was the way to go. And so here I am now actually making sure it stays, because I was a little bit worried that the wire wasn't going to sew it in place well enough. So I used a little bit of orange cotton just down the bottom to sew it in. And I also got a little bit creative, just a little bit with my sewing, and I made some little leaves. Well, they're kind of more like sticks sticking out. So now it was time to tack on some of these little chipboard confetti butterflies from Unwell Studio that I had painted with the white gesso. And I picked one of the larger ones to start with because I knew that would be a bit easier. And I mean, they sewed on okay, but it was very fiddly, and I'm not the most patient person in the world. And so I did actually decide to glue the rest of them on. But I did give a few of them a quick little tacky kind of sew through the middle of them, just to make them look a bit more authentic. Especially the paper ones, because they looked really good with the holes through them, and I could really push those little wings up to make them stand up. So I added all those butterflies. It's usually a good idea, if you're going to have a swarm of butterflies, to start with your smaller ones at the bottom and build up to your bigger ones at the top. But this time around, I did some smaller ones at the bottom, and then I put the bigger ones throughout the middle, and then some smaller ones up the top. And then to finish the whole thing off, I got out my gesso and put a little bit on my finger, and I applied it to the top of the chipboard just to give it that slight little white highlight. I also rubbed some onto the flowers, and I also put a little bit over the wall, but not very much, a little bit on the sticks, and voila, it was all done. Thank you to Dee Dee and Jen for having me as their guest artist in January. I'm going to put a link to the Facebook page in the comments section, and this is where you'll find Dee Dee and Jen's videos as well. See you later, and thanks for watching.